These last few days in northwestern Pennsylvania have been rather, well, shall I say, unseasonably warm and sunny. They have driven many of us out into our yards to begin the recovery process from what seemed to be an awful long winter. Growing up, these were the days when the air was filled with a pungent perfume wafting in from the countryside. For it was in these days that the farmers would get out and begin to manure the fields in preparation for planting. Rather than being simply an obnoxious smell, it was a smell of hope, of things yet to come. One could almost taste the harvest. Farmers have an interesting perspective on life and, I think, faith in general. They see it as both seasonal and yet forward-oriented. There are the seasons of fallow, preparation, growth, harvest. And yet it is all focused toward the future of what is yet to come, the next season. It's no wonder that Jesus uses agricultural images so often in his stories. There is the one of the owner who comes to one of his fig trees and recognizes that it hasn't produced fruit for 3 years. He tells the steward, "Cut it down, this thing is worthless." But the steward says, "Hold on, give me a chance. Let me aerate it. Let me fertilize it. And let's see what it can do." Jesus uses this parable to talk about life in the in-between. The time between Christ is risen and Christ will come again, the time in which we live, the time of the earthly kingdom. He tells the story on the heels of questions about events in the world and whether or not they are judgments upon society. And Jesus says they are part of life. This is how you deal with it. And he gives the same advice, in a sense, as he does when they want to talk about the end of the world. Get to work. Prepare. Watch. Listen. But let me catch you working when I come. Jesus has given us instructions for 2 major work pieces that we are to be busy with. One is a great commandment, the other is a great commission. And they're related. The commandment is to love God and our neighbor. The commission is to go and tell what God has done in our lives. We can't do the latter without the former. To love God and neighbor is the preparation. It's living in the stinking time of preparation. Manure time, if you would. And oh, do we know about those days? We seem to have had our fill of them lately. Pandemics, political upheaval, and now war in the Ukraine. What next? And then there are all those personal issues that we've had to deal with as well. Are these judgments? What have we done wrong? That's right. These are the days when these things happen. It's time to focus. To recapture our love and trust that God will provide for us in the midst of even these calamities. That God has all this in hand. But also to reach out for the neighbors around us, particularly those in need. To continue to work on our relationships that are so easy in these days of isolation to give up on. These are the days when it is imperative that we work harder at our care of one another and allow for the care of ourselves. In doing this, we are setting the groundwork for the Great Commission to go and tell. For part of our job, part of the work that we are given is to share what God has done in our lives, to tell those stories in the midst of these odoriferous times, these obnoxious odors that permeate the world. We're called to bring good news, signs of hope, signs of what is yet to come in God's time. Yes, the world stinks right now. But think of what is yet to come. It's not our call, but it is our job to be at work, to continue the work of loving and sharing, that the world around us may have hope as well in these manure times of preparation. Jesus is a rock in a weary land, a weary land, a weary land. My Jesus is a rock in a weary land, a shelter in the time of storm. No one can do like Jesus, not a mumbling word he said. He went walking down to Lazarus' grave, and he raised him from the dead. Oh, Jesus is a rock in a weary land, a weary land, a weary land. My Jesus is a rock in a weary land, a shelter in the time of storm. When Jesus was on earth, the flesh was very weak. He took a towel and wrapped himself, and he washed his disciples' feet. My Jesus is a rock in a weary land, a weary land, a weary land. My Jesus is a rock in a weary land, a shelter in the time of storm. Yonder comes my Jesus, him whom I love so well. He has the palm of victory and the keys to death and hell. Oh, Jesus is a rock in a weary land, a weary land, a weary land. My Jesus is a rock in a weary land, a shelter in the time of storm.